Central, and a little-known enclave north, Koreatown.
Chaos could happen in a split second.
You couldn't not look out your window and see flames and smoke clouds. Like that was a moment when LA just kind of like, I think, realized itself.
To walk on the streets of Koreatown where I felt somewhat safe, although actually at the time crime rate was very high, but still you felt safe walking on the streets, and then to suddenly feel fear and that the fabric of society could break down so quickly.
4월 달만 되면 아직 20년 아니라 얼마나
Every year, when April comes around, I find myself quite depressed.
우울해요. 한 3시간 사이에
In about 3 hours, everything I worked for in America, for almost 20 years, it all disappeared.
없어지니까 앞이 캄캄한 정도가 아니고
I had no idea what to do with myself going forward.
앞이 보이질 않아요.
When you see, right, African Americans who have had a long history of racial subordination in the United States go through a clear and vivid example of police brutality, something that they thought they finally could hold the system to account for because it was caught on videotape. Right? This is the one place where you don't have to believe someone else's story. You can believe your own eyes in some sense. And then for that to not be enough, given again the socioeconomic conditions of that time, right? In that neighborhood with high unemployment rates, high crime, no opportunity, you should not have been surprised that Los Angeles would have exploded.
More and more shops and businesses were just being consumed by fire within a few hours. As far as we could see from 8th and Vermont south, the entire boulevard was on fire. It looked like a war zone.
I'm coming down the Santa Monica freeway, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and there were 3 other cars on the freeway with me. And I remember I was driving next to a white guy, and I start moving over to get off at Crenshaw. And the guy looks out his window at me like, "Are you insane? You can't get off in Crenshaw? Are you crazy?" And I'm looking at the guy like, "No, I'm cool." Everybody in the hood knows me.
It was on this corner that this man, Reginald Denny, got beat down. It was on this corner that we said, that's all we can stand. We can't stand no more.
Most people see just the tape, but there are a lot of things that happened behind the tape. And there was the midnight raid to acquire the tapes, the LAPD wanting the tapes, some of the gang members upset about the tapes being surrendered to the authorities. You know, I had to testify in probably 6 trials, and I was being subpoenaed for federal grand juries and state grand juries, and that was just because of videotape.
They were interviewing looters, and I saw in the background, and I recognized that shopping mall because that's where I used to go to shop. That's where I used to go and get my shoes, but it used to be a Kenny shoe store. And when I saw that image, it really, really hit home for me because my parents only lived about 4 or 5 blocks away from there.
Almost 50% of the $1 billion in property damage that occurred were incurred by Korean Americans. And I have a map in my office that shows where all the fires happened. I believe there was about 3,600 fires. And these little dots, the bulk of it is in Koreatown in South LA, where many of the small business owners were present.
사우스 센트럴 저기서 할 때도 저는 관계가 좀 좋았어요.
When I was working in South Central, I had great relationships.
괜찮겠다고 나는 사실은
I really thought my store would be okay, so I left to go home.
설마 가게를
I really didn't think our store would get broken into.
나는 뜻밖에도 우리
It was unexpected. I thought our store would not be harmed. because I thought we had such a great relationship with the neighborhood. So I thought the community would protect our store honestly. Last week, I went back there for the 20th anniversary with some CNN journalists. When I got there, it was very painful for me. I didn't want to see it. I thought I had forgotten the pain after 20 years, but I was tormented trying to hold myself together. I wondered what I possibly did wrong to end up like this. I never want to go back.
Yeah, that's me. Ted Kennedy was a pretty good friend of my father's, and I had a chance to know him when I was a very young kid, and we used to exchange letters back and forth. So the picture that we're looking at right now is my father when he first started opening up his first business. Now it says Parks Wilshire Jewelers, and it's the 1991, so it's 1 year before
the LA riots.
3/4 of our family is at that location because they all worked. My father gave them jobs. He was helping everybody. He decided that it was becoming a little too dangerous at that location, so he had to go there and just make sure everyone got home okay and prevent people from relooting the place or lighting more fires to the place because it had already been looted. I guess people decided, hey, look, this is going to be a gunfight, and they decided to, on the south end of that plaza, decide to fire back at my father and the person that he was with. And so they directed their gunfire to that location. Mind you, at this point, it's pretty much martial law because there is no police enforcement.
Why is our community being depicted, especially with that Black-Korean conflict that I had never heard of, and that we didn't have articulate leaders in our community that could really be an advocate for our community. And it was kind of all that mixed emotions that were coming in and feeling the pain.
It was almost like a conscious attempt for people in power, so to create this myth about Black and Koreans having conflict, to help to create it. And when they didn't want to show where Blacks and Koreans were getting along.
We didn't identify with the African American population, but we got along very well. I mean, they took care of their community affairs. We had our community affairs, but we had a very good relationship. And then it was so.
What year was that?
In the 30s.
But it's this very easy translation from the individual, right, to the group, which we should always be on guard against whenever we're talking about race, and which we've been educated to be on guard against when we deal with African Americans and Latinos, that we actually tend to entirely forget when we deal with Asians. Maybe it's because we think they're the model minority. Maybe it's because we think they aren't subject to discrimination. But the way that you'll show a Korean man as a gun-toting vigilante and replicate that image over and over and over again because it actually brings in eyeballs so that you could sell advertisements, and never to show the complexity of a whole group is the thing that I think bothers me most. And this is an error even sophisticated, progressive intellectuals who understand what it means to internalize the lessons of the civil rights movement make all the time.
I'm not sure about the first night, but on the second night, because the media kept showing the footage, everyone thought it was okay to go and take things from the stores. So they all came and took what they wanted. A lot of Koreans did too. Because the media kept broadcasting the footage, even of the police handing the goods over to them, yes, there's footage of the police handing the goods to them, as if to say, here you go. And they didn't want to let the owners stick around, because then they would have to fight with them if they were around, so they'd rather have them comfortably take the goods. That's what the media did by shooting the scene as they did. Meanwhile, they focused their cameras up at the Koreans with guns. Because we all had to go to the army, we all know how to handle guns. But there weren't that many who used guns. I myself have a lot of guns, but I didn't use them. Only a few used the guns. It's because they kept showing the footage that it became an issue.
I would come home and my parents would have the Korean news on around 10, and it felt like there was a Korean store owner killed doing business in places like South LA and other high crime areas every night. It felt like it. Over 23 store owners were killed during that season. I would say bulk of LA, but other parts of the country. But none of that was covered in mainstream media.
No police die, no fireman die, only citizen die because the police is not working. So we have to protect all of the people, not only Korean people, sometimes white, black, Latino. We protect all of Southern California with a weapon for ourselves. First time, they don't protect. They just look who is looting and make a fire. They just make a portal. After riot, they arrest by that portal, by that videotape.
Do you think they don't trust you and they follow you around just because they have nothing better to do? Or do you think they're doing that based on previous experience? And my kids were looking at me and go, well, yeah, it's, probably previous experience. And I go, what would be that previous experience? And they go, well, that would be that other kids have, come in and stolen things, or other people have tried to rip them off, or other people have, shoplifted things. And I go, yeah. So you get mad at these Korean store owners who are trying to eke out a living, who are trying to, support their own families, who are, working, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day sometimes. But you don't get mad at Johnny, and you don't get mad at Ricky, who look like you, talk like you, dress like you, act like you, wear the same clothes you do, and go in there and steal from these people every day.
Koreans were dominating the swap meet trend, and the primary, I would almost say, 100% customer base were the people of the community who had nothing in the swap meet that they put in there or had anything invested into it.
They would get a large building and they would set up a bunch of tiny little booths, tiny little stores, selling things like jewelry or hardware or athletic shoes, t-shirts, caps, clothing, and they would have like all these little booths and little markets set up inside this bigger store, and that's basically a swap meet.
At that time, the Korean population's perception, I'm not saying it was true, was like they were kind of like condescending towards their customer base. And people used to be critical of that. They have various movies like Menace to Society where the guy goes into the liquor store and the Korean people are following you around. I mean, that's actually true. I'm not saying it happened everywhere, but that perception that people's like, these people don't trust us, and we keep spending money with them, making them rich.
Even now, you go into a lot of parts of South Central, there's no JCPenney down there. There's no Ross down there. There's no TJ Maxx down there. So if you were looking for like shoes or clothes for your kids or things like that, t-shirts, these little swap meets kind of filled the void.
It's unfair, but when you see people progressing and you're not, you make all sorts of reasons why, and like there's a lot of middle-class black people doing very well, but it was a poor and working class that were having hard times on their jobs and looked at other people and says, why are they doing, but how can they own the stores here we can't? How come we can't get loans and so forth?
The Korean Americans were a victim of racism by the establishment. The LAPD abandoned the Korean Americans, and I just think they were a victim of racism.
I heard an African American leader say, he never imagined Koreans as being victims. And that is kind of a reality. And so in that way, actually not just victims, but they were perpetrators. And what's really strange is that the Rodney King situation had absolutely nothing to do with the Korean community and the store owners. But for whatever reason, we somehow became the scapegoat, and the anger that should have been directed towards the system was redirected to the Korean community, and we got the brunt end of that anger.
There's a lot of potential violence and a lot of anger and a lot of resentment that's always there in ways when there's no hope in a particular area or a city. And we have to be mindful of that as we think about, even if we think the economy is kind of on the upswing and that things will get better, there are huge pockets of urban America where there's essentially no hope and no opportunity. And when that happens, violence can be really close by.
The Korean people nowadays seem to be like right on with the tide or the trend of the community. They're part of the community. I'm speaking specifically of the community on 74th and Normandy, Lawrence and Normandy area. These Koreans here are cool. Being negative nowadays, nobody wants a negative person. So I think they kind of, weighed themselves out. It's difficult to have a business if you're like extremely negative towards people. And in this community, specifically, the Koreans are nice. And people are nice to them because we actually need them. And then again, they actually need us. So I guess it's a give and take.
Thank you very much, my man. Have a good one.
Rise on up. Rise on up. Just like those stupid kids who hate just cause they talk to do so. Fuck what they tell you. The treasures that they sell us can't amount much more than what you do. Fuck what they tell you.